Okay, so we're going to make a bud vase today, which isn't a whole lot different than most of the other things that we've made as far as shapes go. But we'll talk about some of those differences as we go. And with this demonstration, I won't talk about coning or centering because I feel like you have a pretty good handle on that. We'll just talk about what makes this shape different from other shapes that you've made to this point. We're basically combining sort of a mug shape with our 6-inch cylinder that we made early on. So we'll use some of those same techniques to collar the clay back in to make our bud vase. And we call it a bud vase because it's just meant to hold one flower. It's going to have a pretty small top to it. So I eventually want this to have a pretty small bottom on it. But if I make the bottom really small in the beginning, I'm not going to be able to lift the clay very well before it falls over. So I want to make the bottom a little bit wider than I think it should be in the end, and then I'll close it back in later. We'll go ahead and take our sponge and flatten out the bottom. We'll work with our hands in tandem with our thumb on the outside, peace fingers on the inside. And we'll squeeze the clay and push it up and in towards the middle. We want to make sure that we don't allow the clay to get too thin, because if it gets thin, it won't allow us to collar it in up at the top. And when I lift the clay, I want to make sure that it never gets too wide up at the top. I always keep it so I can just barely fit my hand in there to throw. If it gets too wide, it becomes really difficult to collar it in later. So I'll control the top, and I make it just wide enough to be able to barely fit my hand in there. I'll take my sponge, I'll dry it out a little bit, I'll collar the top back in. And this time, before I do a throw, I want to make my bottom smaller, and I want to squeeze this in so I can start to make a bulbous shape on the bottom. So what I want to do is I want to wet both of my hands, and I want to use this inside line on my hands to collapse down on the very bottom of the clay where it touches the bat. And to do this, I want lots of water on my hands, and I want to put my face right over the opening so I can see how I'm squeezing the shape. Now I'm going to kind of cradle it in my hands, and I'm going to squeeze the top again and get it back under control. And now I'll move my hands away. And the clay that was once at the very bottom is now moved into this portion of the shape. So now I can grab a hold of it and lift it up into my form. I'm going to slow down a little bit. I want to make sure don't get too wide, too fast down at the very bottom. So now the bottom of my form is just about done. The last thing I want to do, if I can find it, is take my metal rib and dry the bottom out. Okay, because if I can dry the bottom and finish that shape off, it's much stronger and it can support what I'm going to do to the top of it. I'll take my metal rib and just kind of work it from the outside. And I'm not really trying to change the shape at this point. I'm just trying to dry out the shape that I have. So you can see all the wet clay that I took off of the outside. can do it one more time. And I don't even have to have my hand on the inside because all I'm doing is drying things out right now. So now we kind of come back to the 6-inch cylinder for the top. And we think about the different ways that we're able to make that clay grow. We choked in on the outside of it, so that was a method. We used our fingertips on the outside and did like a fingertip throw. So I'm squeezing the clay just a little bit between my fingertips and I'm pushing it up and in towards the center. I have just a little bit more weight than what I want here, so I'm going to actually remove that. And then we could also do a 1-finger throw. So we would have the thumb on the outside, your index finger on the inside, and we would squeeze the clay just between those 2 fingers, and we would lift it up and in towards the middle of the pot. So there are 3 different methods, okay? And generally when I make a shape like this, I use all 3. And I just kind of keep bouncing back and forth between those 3 methods until I'm satisfied with my end result. I'm not satisfied yet, but I want to dry out just a little bit more down the bottom. Really that's starting to wobble on me a little bit. I can drop my finger in and I can just do a 1-finger throw. And I'm making sure that this shape is a gradual change into the neck. If this is straight and the neck comes straight up from there, it tends to want to sag right here on me. So I need to have a nice gradual angle. I can just use my fingertips from the outside. Again, I'm going back and forth between these 3 methods until I'm satisfied with my overall shape. This still feels a little bit stiff to me. I like the idea of it maybe coming in and then fanning back out. But I want to make sure that this doesn't collapse in on me. So what I might do is I might take my needle tool and wet it, and I can actually throw right up against my needle tool to be able to make that neck a little bit skinnier, a little bit taller, and appear to kind of fan out a little bit more towards the top. And don't forget about all the different decorative techniques that you know so far. Just because you're making a different form that doesn't require one of those techniques, you can still use one or several. All right, that's how to make a bud vase.